Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You are in the right place. This is Gen Z School. We're in session. We're banking on Gen Z today. We've got a really great set of Gen Zers being totally transparent and sharing all of their thoughts around all things money. This webinar is brought to you with our great partners at Collier Simon, Performance Creative Agency, delivering high performance strategy and creative for iconic brands, content creators, and category creators, and new ventures. I'm Matana. I'm one of the co-founders of Vital. We do Gen Z insights and action plans. And this is my co-founder, Natalie. She'll be leading the discussion today. I'm going to be introducing our esteemed panelists here. They've also prepared a little question. When they introduce themselves, if you guys could just answer a question, if you could give yourself a piece of financial advice way back when you were 16. I can't remember 16 because that was a long time ago, but for some of y'all, that's like maybe 4 years or 8 years ago. If you could give a piece of financial advice to your 16-year-old self, what would it be, how that would impact you today? So first up, we've got T. He is an old hat at our Vital webinars. T is a community organizer and an editor. T, how would you answer that question?
How y'all doing? I'm C. Me personally, so when I was 16, this game came out, and it was a game called Fortnite. And they had an in-game currency that, for some reason, for the next like 4 years, I decided to blow my money on. So I'd probably go back and be like, "Hey, don't do that because that was way too much, and it's like not useful now."
Thank you. Good piece of advice. Sorry, I don't have a time machine.
It's
Alex,
okay.
Alex was formerly working in tech sales, is still attempting to work in tech sales. She is also taking courses in organizational psychology. Alex, what would you tell your 16-year-old self?
I would advise my 16-year-old self to talk to my friends' parents and fill in the gaps that I didn't get for myself and learn how to build a budget at that age. Whether or not I had the money to fill out that budget is another question. And then to get help with the FAFSA and get help with the aid applications for college and try to get ahead of that.
Great, very wise. Next up, we have Josh. Josh is a photographer and a student in studying at university. Josh, what's financial advice would you give your 16-year-old self?
I would 100% go back and tell my 16-year-old self to not spend as much money on food and clothes and to open a savings account.
Good one. And Rose, last but not least, we have Rose, who's a writer and community organizer and also works in talent acquisition. Rose, what's your piece of financial advice for the young Rose?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. First, start investing small amounts of money. And I really do mean when I was working as a barista at 14 years old, take $10 of every paycheck and put it in an investing account. I think there's so much like fear around investing, and understandably so, but just starting to buy stocks and things, anything is better than nothing. And then two, really think about the cost of, higher education. I was very privileged in that my parents were, paying for my college. But that money is still really, really important. So I would, I think, have even more conversations with my parents around, hey, do I want to go to this school that maybe isn't considered quite as elite, but gave me a scholarship and has a lower price tag than the university that I went to?
Thank you. Natalie, do you want to take it away? Natalie, do you want to answer the question?
No, I want to share the time with the panelists.
All right, so one more housekeeping. If you guys didn't hear me, bottom row on your Zoom, you should have a Q&A button. Open that up, answer any questions, and we'll get to them at the end. Thank you. Natalie, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. And the deck is not visible, Matana, just FYI. So if we can throw that up so I can take everyone through the agenda. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I want to take you through what we're going to be discussing today so you can see how the conversation is going to flow. We just had our introduction. We met the panelists. Thank you guys for sharing. We're going to go through their financial habits and influences, really focused on credit and credit cards, and some tax information as well. Understanding credit and financial planning, connecting with Gen Z's needs. So exactly what are the needs of Gen Z from their own mouths. If we have time, which we may not have time for, we'll do some key insights or takeaways. And if we don't, we'll jump right into the Q&A session so we can get your guys answered directly from the panelists. All right, so when we're thinking about financial habits and influences, to give you guys some background, we do a run through with the panelists and we discuss kind of their responses, their perspectives, and then we present this information to you guys along with some third-party research as well on more demographic, generational considerations. And so what we really saw and got out of some of the prep work and research that we did was this idea that financial literacy is very patchwork, especially with Gen Z. And we have Rose here who said she understands tiny basics, but has never really had a reason to dive into it all that much. And one of her siblings recently got pre-approved for a mortgage. So she was hearing a bit about that and what that looked like for her. And so the feedback we were getting when asking everyone, where do you get financial information? How do you vision your future? Where does all this come from? It was very piecemeal. It's like, well, my friend did this and I saw them, or, I saw this example online, or I read about this. And so it's really gaining information from everywhere possible, especially because there isn't a very systemized, consistent, standard education that Gen Z is receiving around finances, how to think about it. In addition to this really interesting concept I just became aware of called money dysmorphia, which I'm going to ask the panelists about a bit as well. This idea that because of all of the massive amounts of data and influx of information they're receiving, it's hard for them to actually understand where they sit. So similar to body dysmorphia, how you look at yourself and you don't really see what other people see, you don't see the true experience of yourself in a mirror. That's a lot of also what impacts Gen Z and other generations, but Gen Z in particular, because of that economic instability and how much random information and all different qualities of information they're receiving. It's really hard to understand where they should sit. We can go to the next slide. So some key things to think about before we get into our first question for the panelists is this idea of patchwork of influences, that the financial habits are shaped by this diversity, mostly, real people and real examples is really key. So family, friends, associates, and then personal research, and then some content. They are aspiring homeowners and investors. They have very similar financial aspirations to the rest of the generations. And so they are looking for financial goals like home ownership. How can they have a home? They're probably hearing a lot that they'll never have a home or that it's not going to be something that's possible for them. They want to support a family, although obviously it's completely less traditional than maybe previous generations, and exploring investment opportunities, but of course more open to crypto and other forms of maybe emerging investment. But often are lacking the knowledge because of that lack of standardization and resources to really confidently know how to pursue this. And credit as a means to an end. So what we heard is also Gen Z's experience of credit is really this tool to achieve specific financial goals, renting an apartment, buying a car, establishing that financial flexibility, but not a lot of practical needs for long-term credit goals. They're aware of the importance, but not really sure exactly how that fits in. And we had Josh here, which I'm sure everyone shares this sentiment. I wish I knew everything there was to saving money and really leveraging money. And so for our first question, we'd like to ask you guys, how do you think about credit? Can you share that with the audience? And what do you know about how to use and leverage credit? And how does that fit into your financial goals and aspirations?
So me personally, the way that I view credit, I view it as, like you were saying, a tool, one of those things that will play a big factor in my future in terms of home ownership, supporting my family, anything like that. But for the most part, it's something that I'm still actively trying to learn about. as I go. You know, you make whatever mistakes you make, learn whatever you learn from it. But ultimately, I think it's something that, you know, everybody has to deal with whether they want to or not at in like some way, shape, or form in their lifetime.
Thanks, Josh. And when you think about credit, like when did you first apply for like a credit card? Is that your main source of credit build? I know Rose, in our pre-rehearsal, you mentioned that I think a friend's mom got a mortgage and put her on as a second signee. And so then she got that credit build that way. But you know, not many people have that option. So Josh, what was your way of building credit? Was it through credit card usage? When did you get your first credit card?
Yeah, definitely. My first experience with credit was credit card usage. Because I didn't, you know, when I graduated high school, I didn't go to school and take out loans or anything like that, which I know a lot of people did, and like that was their introduction to it. But when I turned, I think 20, I got my first credit card and pretty much just learned as much as I can with that. So yeah, I think that yeah, age 20 and with credit cards is where my journey started.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, I'll hop in. So credit has come into play most for me when I've tried to rent apartments, and I've moved at least once a year for the last decade of my life. So definitely something that arises often. And I started building credit. I was really fortunate in this way that my grandpa opened a card in my name and used it for small expenses, but allowed me to start building credit from the time I was 15, which was huge.
Similarly to Alex, I remember when I was going off to college, my dad was just kind of like, I already had an account with Wells Fargo, and he was like, here, you need to get a credit card, you know, spend small amounts of money, pay it off every month, you build good credit. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. Um, I feel like it hasn't come up that much for me since, only because I've only lived in one apartment in New York City and I have stayed here. So it's like I gave them all my financial information in the beginning. I pay my rent on time every month. My landlords don't question anything. Now I think about it a little bit more because I am thinking about that next step of buying an apartment. So it's come up for me a bit more now.
Thanks, Rose. What about you, T?
Yeah, for me, it's it's come up more recently, um, because I am planning to move, um, and so I've been trying to navigate building credit currently, actually, and the main way I've been doing it is just like by financing furniture for my home. So
And T, talk a bit about, so you said it's coming up recently for you, very much around a move. Was your also first introduction to credit card usage and that kind of element?
no, I guess like experiencing credit cards and like credit usage, absolutely, but just like witnessing it, I think it would stem from like my parents struggling when they were young, when I was younger.
Mhm. And seeing them go through credit usage and then kind of learning the importance of credit.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then I want to talk a bit about what I brought up in the intro about this money dysmorphia. I know we didn't discuss this in the rehearsal, but it's something I'd love to get your guys' feedback on. Is that something that you feel? Do you feel that it's hard for you to understand what your finances should look like? What is normal? What is expected? Do you feel like when you look at your finances, you don't really know what's right and what's wrong? Do you feel that dysmorphic experience? Does that kind of term make sense to you? And do you see that in your experiences?
Absolutely. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, but I think that that was something that used to happen pretty often. Now, the way that I look at it is not really how anything necessarily should be in terms of anybody else or anybody in like my age range or anything like that. It's simply just where am I at and figuring out what's right for me and my financial journey and goals.
And Josh, how do you determine your personal financial journey and goals? And how do you feel that rightness of what feels good to you?
I mean, pretty much just budgeting, seeing what all I need slash want out of life. Like for example, if I know that I want to travel, it's like, okay, let me make sure I have enough money to not only just travel so I can go wherever and then come back and have all these bills to pay with, but make sure everything's paid, make sure like I said, make sure that everything's paid, everything's taken care of. I have money left over from when I come back to travel. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing with X amount of money, like just figuring out different routes that your finances could go, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks.
Mhm.
Rosa,
I
Alex?
think,
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I think that the money dysmorphia can also be really caused by your environment. So I looked it up, and I think it's when you think you're in a worse financial situation than you're in a lot of the time, and living in a place like New York can make it feel like you have to pay just to like go out into the world every day. So I think it's definitely relatable. And I think I'm experiencing my first bout of unemployment right now. So part of my budget, like my whole budget switched around. And I think making granular adjustments can help and contribute to the dysmorphic aspect of it. But building in an emergency fund has become a really big part of that. And I think that helps put the rest of it into perspective.
Thanks, Alex. What about you, Rose?
Yeah, definitely seconding everything that the panelists have said. The idea of money dysmorphia makes so much sense to me. I love that term. And I think it makes a lot of sense because everyone is coming from different aspects of like wealth and generational privilege. And then on top of that, everyone's coming from different levels of financial literacy. And then on top of that, there's this stigma around even talking about money. So, I mean, even with your good friends, sometimes people think it's inappropriate to ask how much money that people are making, which I personally try to, be incredibly transparent with people. Like I think maybe that's a little bit of my talent acquisition background, but I think especially for women, people of color, other marginalized folks, like we all need to be talking about money a lot, so that we're not, the system doesn't get us worse than it already is. So I think that all contributes to this aspect of like money dysmorphia.
Thanks, Rose. So I'm going to build off that a bit and then jump into the second section. But it reminded me of in rehearsal, something T you had said around, and I think everyone agreed with this, of wanting examples that are closer to your actual experience. And I think, Rose, to your point, this money dysmorphic experience of looking at billionaires, looking at millionaires online, looking at people saying you can be a crypto millionaire. And it's like, especially with the current economic situation, how do you rise to that? How do you ascend to that level? It can be hard to kind of know that. So, really having examples that are close to the chest as opposed to something out there could be really helpful.
Can I add
all right,
one
so,
thing there?
Oh, go ahead.
So I know T and I share the experience of seeing our parents be in a bunch of credit card debt growing up, and that can cause, to Rose's point, with the intergenerational trends of dysmorphia. It's like you see money being spent that's not there, and it is a lot of work when you reach adulthood to build an understanding that's rooted in reality. So I think that contributes as well.
Thanks, Alex. All right, so we're going to jump to next section, understanding credit and financial planning. And something that we really saw in our conversations and the research was this idea of, and I think you've been hearing it too, credit as defensive versus offensive. And so this is really the idea of a defensive strategy. Okay, I need my credit to be X for this purpose, but not necessarily this offensive long-term planning goal orientation with credit leverage. And we can jump to the next slide. And so some of the things that contribute to this is this idea of navigating with limited resources, as you're hearing. So they rely on a mix of tools, family and friends to navigate these finances. Some popular credit tools that the panelists mentioned they used was Mint, Credit Karma, Experian, and their banks, who have a lot of credit options now within the banking apps. This defensive versus offensive is really a tactic to meet immediate and often impending needs. Although there is a really strong desire to understand proactive credit strategies, but specifically proactive credit strategies that are very relevant and close to the chest for their everyday experiences, not something that feels impersonal or far away. And credit as a double-edged sword. So obviously there's a lot of caution around credit. Some people have seen their parents get into credit card debt, have seen, people online speaking about the dangers of credit or the general institutional distrust that can exist between banking and credit card institutions and different demographics. And so, Gen Z is really interested in having credit that's built responsibly and keeping balances low and paying off debt regularly to avoid these financial pitfalls, but are often economically disadvantaged to do so. For instance, if you are dealing with unemployment, maybe you have to rely more on credit, or maybe your financial situation means you have to rely more on credit. And that can be a very tense experience of how do I do this responsibly? How do I do this in a really comfortable way? And T said, I wish I knew how to better set up things for myself financially, and I wish I had the resources. So there is a really, really strong desire among the community to understand these things. So we want to get into a bit more tactical questions. We can go to the next slide, which is, how do you guys check your credit score? I know I mentioned some tools that I use, but kind of take us through your process. When do you check it? Why do you check it? What services do you use?
Yeah, I use Mint. Also, American Express does free credit checks for me, but I think Mint just got acquired by Credit Karma. So I think you have to move all your stuff over. Today's the last day, but that's what I use.
Thanks, Alex. And how did you end up using Mint? What was your journey to Mint?
I tried a number of different things. So I've also tried Rocket Money. Mint is one that has like budget building, connects to all of your accounts, your investment accounts. So it's just a really holistic platform, which is what I was looking for. And it's very user friendly and intuitive to use. Like I feel that it's built for Gen Z and millennials. And I responded that way.
Thanks. And what do you feel makes it feel it's built for Gen Z and millennials? What are the markers that you see?
It's really visual. And it's really, it's kind of like if you're navigating through a social media platform where it's visually appealing and it's just intuitive, like easy to work your way through. Whereas I've used some other ones, like I used to have a budget that I built on Excel, and that was pretty much the opposite if I could compare it to anything. So, yeah.
Nice. And what would you say are your top uses when you go into the credit platform? What are you looking for? What are you checking? What's the holistic services that you would use?
It flags transactions that seem unusual, which is really helpful. It helps me get an understanding of like the subscriptions I don't know that I have that are sitting out there. And then I check my credit score constantly because it's free. So it's nice to stay on top of. And I've been able to learn a lot about how to build a high credit score through checking it in response to actions that I've taken, which has been helpful. But just the surety of knowing where my score stands on a regular basis is huge for providing a level of comfort.
Thanks, Alex. What about you, T?
Yeah, for me, I use Experian. That's how I ended up. I used my credit because I had to lock my social actually, and then I noticed they had credit checks on the website, so I've stuck with that for like the longest. And I feel like checking my credit is important to me again because I am moving soon, and I want to make sure I'm on top of things because housing is terrible right now. So
you're really checking it, trying to see, okay, am I prepared and do I have the level that I need for this rental?
absolutely, it's like a safety net.
Thanks. What about you, Rose?
I remember first checking my credit maybe at age like 20, being like, wait, I have credit. I wonder what it is. And just using Credit Karma because I feel like it was like the only thing advertised to anyone at the time. But since then I haven't really utilized any app, website, software because it's just automatic in my banking accounts. So I feel like what both Wells Fargo and Bank of America will just like tell me my credit, and it's always been fine. So I just haven't dug into it more because of that.
And what does it provide in your like banking app? Is it just your credit score? Does it give you any other information as well?
Yeah, I feel like it's this little like wheel and it shows you your credit score, and then it's like tells you if it's like fine, good, great, whatever. And then if you click into it, I'm sure it gives you more information. But again, because I haven't needed my credit score in years and it's always been like, over 700, I just like haven't looked into it too much. And you are all making me think that maybe I should.
Thanks, Rose. What about you, Josh?
Honestly, I feel like I should check my credit more, even though I check it like every day slash every other day. I don't know. Like, there's nothing even like super specific that I needed for right now. I just like making sure that it's still where I left it. But yeah, it's like checking progress and whatnot.
So I want to talk a bit about this kind of idea of the progress around credit and credit scores. And, for me, when I'm looking at my credit scores, obviously it's a bit of a delayed gratification, right? Because it's the previous month's behavior and how that then impacts your score. And I even struggle to understand, okay, it feels very arbitrary because I do the same actions every month, and yet my credit score keeps shifting a couple points every month. And I'm like, I don't really want to go into this and try and figure out how this is being gamed. But I want to hear from you guys, like, is that kind of this idea of delayed gratification? Are there things that would be more helpful for you to understand how your behaviors impact your credit? Like for me, it's hard because you're trying to have me look at behaviors that I did a month ago, go through things and try and understand how does that impact my credit score today? So that kind of lack of one-to-one immediacy kind of keeps me limited. I'm wondering if any of you guys have limitations or things that you would like to see from credit reporting, wish list that you have in terms of how credit is communicated and what those factors are.
Yeah, I feel like just like straight up, like what exactly am I doing that causes my credit to shift and change? It feels like a big guessing game, and it feels very unfortunate because I feel like online there's a bunch of different things where people go, "Oh, this changes it," but no, this actually changes it, and they're kind of contradicting. So it's like, what do I follow? Or you can just tell me. Also, like, let me know.
Thanks, T.
I 100% agree with T. I think that something that's very beneficial is just transparency, just telling me, like T was saying, what's making it go up, what's making it go down. But also, I think something else that could be valid is what actually, like whatever service providing tips that actually help it go up. You know what I mean? That actually help you maintain that level.
So I'll give you an example of mine, Josh, and then I'd like to see something more specific for you is like, it'll say, oh, my credit utilization impacted my score, right? In my bank thing. And I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Because I
Exactly.
think of my
Those are just
spending changes
words.
that
Yeah.
consistently, month to
Because
month.
like, because
And
like
I'm like,
too,
where's the line between where did my dollar go, to where my
yeah.
score went down or up? Like that would be an example for me. What about you?
No, I completely understand that because, like, to an extent, you can, kind of understand terms like that, like credit utilization, but like specifics, like tell me exactly which transaction it is that I made that like affected my credit score, just like little stuff like that. But I'd say that's as specific as I could get with it.
So like, you spend, like for me, it would be like, okay, it'd be nice to know you spent 20% more this month. And
Right.
that made your score move this many points down because your credit utilization went up and your available credit went down. Then I'm like, okay, I get it. But they're just
Yeah.
like, your credit utilization has changed. I'm like, yes, I realize that life is dynamic, but I'm a grown person and I still struggle. So I can only
Yeah,
imagine.
because no, 100%. Because one of my main issues is the fact that I know so many grown adult individuals that still cannot properly explain how their credit works and how their credit is being impacted. So yeah,
Thanks,
This
Josh.
also makes me think about the fact that I took 2 econ classes at a very prestigious university and still don't know how credit works. We're like failing Gen Z and younger generations in our education. Like, why didn't anyone teach us this? So that just really, really puts all these things top of mind for me.
Thanks, Rose. And do you feel like there's like a practicality element that is missing
100%.
from that education? Is it too theoretical and you're not seeing how practically?
100%. Yeah, like why in high school doesn't every high school have econ for the everyday or personal finance? Like that should just be that should just be, you know, in all schools. Um and it's wild that we're missing that and then kids go off into the world, take out huge student loans for college, for example, when they don't even understand the impact of those loans. I have friends who are in hundreds of thousands of debt from student loans because they were told through society that like you should go to like the best school, right? That's what's going to get you a leg up in the world. Now they're like, hey, that actually wasn't the best financial decision at all. And no one told me, and there were no resources for me to figure that out.
Thanks, Rose. What about you, Alex?
I went to the same school as Rose, so I definitely had the same experience in terms of the curriculum. And I agree that personal finance, we're taking civics out of the curriculum. There's a lot of like basic things that we should have in school curriculum. I think we're a little far away from the question, so you want to repeat it for me?
Well, we're talking about kind of what are practical things that you would like to see in your credit, usage. Like everyone here uses a credit checker, but there still seems to be a gray area around understanding exactly what the factors are that impact your credit, what you can do to impact your credit. And so trying to find that bridge between everyone's using it, no one's really understanding it. So what is that bridge?
Yeah, I have a lot of disparate sources for information between those two things. So I like using the points guide to understand strategically how to leverage my credit card. And that's a whole nother layer on top of the basics of understanding ins and outs in credit and debt. I think having a platform that can holistically provide education and perspective into your finances that also is tailored towards whatever group you're in would be really helpful. I think it's a really cookie cutter approach a lot of the time, and that simply does not cut it in a country with this much inequality. So I think having something that's personalized and something that's meant for the layperson, where you can do the most basic financial literacy curriculum if you want, or you can go to something a little bit more complex, I think would be great.
Thanks, Alex. And that actually segues really well into our next section. But like a note, something that I think many people aren't even aware of is how many things you can use to build your credit and try and, that's also, I think, a problem for young people is the volume of things you use outside of even just a credit card to build credit. And so that would be important. Like, can you use subscriptions outside of even your credit card to build credit, which I believe that you can. Okay, so that brings us to our next section. Beautifully, which is impersonal equals alarm bells for Gen Z. And so this is, connecting with what Gen Z's needs are. And T shared that there's been a lot of crash courses from billionaires whose wealth was given to them. I want real stories from like somebody's uncle, like just some dude. I don't want those fake do-it-yourself bootstrap stories. And I think that's a really big element to your point you were sharing, Alex, and I think everyone's kind of shared is the economy has shifted a lot, right? The level of capability and what people are dealing with is shifting a lot generation to generation. And inflation versus wages, all of those kinds of elements. And so Gen Z's like, well, a lot of this information that's available to me doesn't really reflect my reality. Maybe this was a good for a previous generation, but this isn't really relevant for me. And already I'm feeling that this impersonal nature of what you're providing for me doesn't communicate my reality. We can go to the next slide. And so some of the things that we heard was this idea of these systemic barriers and inequities. So Gen Z faces unique challenges from previous generations, student debt, stagnant wages, rising costs of living. And so how can a company really consider that and provide solutions and tactics and be a partner to financial stability by helping them overcome those barriers and understanding how to leverage credit, how to leverage finances in their unique situation. Personalized and relatable education. So they want financial education tailored to their circumstances. I think we're hearing that a lot of like, why don't I just know practical things? Like I've taken all these complex courses, I've been through college, I have this financial information, and I still don't practically understand what my credit utilization actually means. And no one seems willing to tell me that in a straight up way. And this distrust of impersonal institutions. So that idea that sometimes financial institutions and services can speak very generic and impersonally, as if financial education is not integrative and is not connected to many other elements of someone's life and considerations culturally. And so bringing in those factors of what is this audience dealing with and how do they need to be communicated to practically will make a really, really big difference. And we have a quote here from Rose who said, "I'm looking for resources I feel aligned with, combining these resources with real stories. The ads I get for Ellevest are people talking in the camera type of vibe, which I think aligns with how we are attracted to things from an ad and marketing perspective." So I think what would be good is just even to get your perspective a bit on that quote, Rose. Like, what do you like about Ellevest ads? What is that talking to the camera vibe and that perspective of what you're attracted to before we jump into the full panel question?
Totally. Yeah, I honestly don't use Ellevest yet, but the fact that I know their name and that's what comes to mind, I think shows that their ads are working in some way, shape, or form. I think I've seen a big rise in, again, like we've been saying, normal people talking into the camera, telling their stories, right? It's all this UGC that we're seeing. It's why TikTok is so big. And I think that those kinds of real stories are obviously what we're attracted to. And I think with specific programs like Ellevest, they're catered toward women, let's say, or they're catered toward people of color or other marginalized folks. And I think that's a big selling point for Gen Z, just making people feel seen in their identity. So I think that's what I was getting at with that quote.
Thanks for that, Rose. And Alex, I know you spoke a bit about Ellevest, right?
Yeah, I love that it's tailored towards specific groups as well. And something else I like about it is it's a sliding scale. So you can choose to contribute 50 cents a month if that's what's comfortable for you. And I think every financial literacy platform should probably offer that as well. So I think that's a great model.
Thank you. So that brings us to our next question, which is, what would make you want to use a financial service? And how can a financial service tool, et cetera, talk to you, build a relationship? What are the things you're looking for? What do you want to know? What kind of relationship do you want to have with them?
In an ideal world, I would love to have one-on-one attention, have an advisor that I could ask questions to, but also the way that we're having a webinar like this, like host group events where people can have forums and just speak about their experiences, ask questions to someone who works there. I think adding like a human component to it would be really awesome.
I want to add on to what Alex said. I think the human component is very, very important, but just that, I think forums is something that has been a drop ball in so many scenarios. Like forums would be so helpful for so many services, even outside of financials, but especially with financials. Like imagine you don't have to one-on-one attention with an advisor would be great, but imagine being able to go into a forum with other people that use the same service and just being able to talk to them about their experience. That way, you're dealing with a real person, a person that could even be similar to you, that's not just being paid to make a TikTok about whatever service. Like it's real experiences from these people, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree with Josh 100%. I think a forum would help because honestly, even now, like if you look up any question online, the autocomplete will be this and that Reddit. Like people want the forum to talk to each other, and having a built-in forum in your platform cuts out a huge middleman. I'm gonna search through a million like not useful Reddit and core answers when it's right there in your application. Also, again, to the human aspect, and to bring up again, talking to someone who is real. Like on this panel, like Alex said, we're real human people. I'm not going to listen again to some billionaire who had that like safety cushion to fall on for making mistakes because I can't afford to make those mistakes. So I'm not listening. But someone who was, again, just a guy that had the same like struggles I went through and made it perfect. I would love to talk to you.
I also want to say that like on the forum aspect, like that would help so much with something as simple as education. Like we're talking about this entire panel. we have so many people here who who still don't fully understand how credit works, how taxes work, how financial literacy, like what financial literacy even is. Imagine having a forum on these services and platforms where you can learn these things in real time from other people who have been doing this for years, you know what I mean? Who have real life experiences in the things that you're trying to get, information from. Because like T mentioned, if you can do that, like people go and they'll Google anything and then just put Reddit behind it and trust those opinions. So if you're doing it on, an actual verified forum, then I feel like that would be an even better way to approach it.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, I think the idea of these kinds of forums are really interesting and engaging. I find these kinds of conversations really engaging. Another thing I'll say about what would make me want to use like a financial platform is that I want it, I want my finances to have one home. So as I refer to like financial education, I want that to have one home too. I don't want to have to go somewhere to talk about investments. I don't want to have to go somewhere else to talk about socially conscious investments. I don't want to have to go to a third place to talk about credit and then a fourth to talk about my mortgage, right? If all of this had one home where I could, do all of these things, I think that would actually make me like download the app versus all of these like disparate kind of, offerings.
Thanks, guys. So something I'm kind of hearing as well is this idea of, number one, I think a lot of people's concept of education is very maybe a single, conversation, like a one-way conversation. And also something that is maybe widely applicable. But it sounds like you guys are understanding education as significantly more personalized, and that information that's not hyper relevant to your individual needs is not an education, according to you, right? It's like just information at that point. You're not really being educated. And then looking for education in many, basically every opportunity that's available. So don't just tell me my credit utilization and this is a general reason. Generalities don't seem like they're really supporting you guys. And so you really want specifics and you want exactly what's happening. This is when your credit utilization started to go over, and this is how it impacted your credit score. This is the kind of numbers that you're dealing with. You can use these things. Thinking about this idea of financial services and tools, this idea of education, kind of forum-based things, communicating and having deeper conversations. And it sounds like a lot of people learn directly. So watching people either in your immediate life or as people that you relate to and can communicate specifically about their experiences that you see in your own. How do you guys talk about and share information among your friends with things like finance, credit? How do you kind of grow together? Are you comfortable talking about money with your friends?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay, I was just going to say my friends are really open about it, which has been helpful, especially like navigating unemployment at the same time as some other people. And I know it's something that a lot of us have been through in the last few years, but yeah, I feel fortunate in that way. I think my family more so doesn't like to talk about it, which has always felt like a pretty stark disadvantage for me. So I'm grateful that the lines of communication are open there and we're always sharing different investments that are working well for us or different financial tools that we've come to and just kind of keeping an eye on one another.
Yeah, agreed with Alex. I think our generation is, I would say, the most open to talking about money and just like having an understanding of what our friends make, because why would that be a secret? But on the other hand, I do think there is a stigma that is handed down to us from other generations. And I really do try to actively work against that stigma. And I think it's something I saw with my background in talent acquisition a lot. But it's like that's how pay inequity happens. When people at a company aren't talking about what they're making, that's how it ends up that this, white man is making 10K more than this, person of color who joined the team. Or what happened to my friend recently is that they were training someone and realized that that person was about to be making more money than them. And it's just like, it's so ludicrous. But that's why I try to talk about money so much and release some of the stigma around also like generational wealth. Like we need to be upfront about that kind of financial privilege. When I buy a home, I'm like, and I talk about it with people, I'm going to be very honest about like, this is how much money was in a stock account from my parents. This is how much money I saved. This is the bills I didn't have because I don't have student loans. But I think our generation is the most like progressive on that front.
Absolutely. I think Rose took the words right out of my mouth. Like, I think this generation talks about money and how to use it and how they accumulate their funds the most, especially in workforces. Because I was also going to mention, same as Rose, like, it was crazy watching like my older coworkers not wanting to engage in the conversation of how much do you make with me and my other coworkers who are around my age. Because they were like, you can't do that. Why? It's not a rule. like let's talk about it. And I'm thankful to have friends because all my friends are older Gen Z who have way more experience in life than me and have helped me a lot, especially in this past year alone with finances. So yeah, I do have that community and I'm thankful for it.
Thanks, guys. So what I'm hearing a lot is also kind of this idea of, whether you call it money dysmorphia or whatever, like how do these standards get set? And it sounds like you guys are expressing that a lot of these standards are a bit archaic and not relevant. And a lot of that is related to just the lack of available information and maybe some stigmas around communicating openly about your finances. And so when you can actually say, this is what I specifically did, hear from someone who's saying this is what they specifically did, and they're closer to your situation, that's more meaningful. That's an education. And that feels like a way you guys can grow and evolve together. And this is what you guys are doing with your social circles and with your friends, kind of being open about your money, how much money you're making, kind of your credit scores, how you're thinking about credit, sharing information that you find maybe in forums or that you've gotten off Quora or Reddit. I personally love both of these, although I also question the validity of the information. So what I want to do is quickly do the key takeaways and then ask 2 Q&A questions before we close out. I'll ask 3 Q&A questions. So quickly for the Q&A or the takeaway, Matan, if you can throw that slide up. Cool. So some key takeaways from the general discussion. Gen Z has basic knowledge about credit and credit scores, basic understanding of factors influencing those scores. They know there's something related to payment history, credit mix, and utilization, but not much more practical than that. What does that specifically mean? How does their credit card usage, their specific transactions and purchases influence that? They need more information and they're craving for more practicality. Financial products and services used, so basic products, checking savings accounts, credit and debit cards, payment apps, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. You guys heard of some of the Credit, Mint, Credit Karma, Experian, their banks. But crypto investment apps as well, Stash, Acorns, Robinhood. They're using a variety of platforms to check their credit scores. So presenting an opportunity to differentiate by providing these value-added insights, some of what you heard, maybe forum-based information, more practicality around what these general terms mean specifically to their experiences, alongside credit information. They're looking for judgment-free, trustworthy guidance. And so they don't want something where there is that dysmorphic element of, I don't actually know if I'm doing well because what I see standardized is maybe people buying a home, having these families, supporting this, and that's not my reality. And so I don't really understand my finances and how to leverage it. I may feel under leveraged, and maybe that's not the case. Maybe I just have a limiting belief around it, and I'm looking for a financial institution who can support me better in the realities of my finances. And there's an opportunity to reframe the narrative around credit as a strategic tool. So credit is about achieving financial goals and not only a necessary evil, as I think we've kind of heard some of that sentiment. And so education, and not just education top down one way, but true education at every opportunity, very practical on how to leverage credit responsibly, how to leverage their financial world responsibly, builds that trust and those long-term relationships. So we're going to jump into the Q&A session in the last few minutes that we have. Okay, so we have a question Do you feel like people who aren't talking about money openly end up feeling money dysmorphia? Do you feel like transparency is a way to combat that?
Yes. Yeah, I feel like people I think it's like more of a scared thing. Like you're like afraid of how like you may be perceived, but also if you're like doing things correctly. Um but I think being able to talk about it and openly with people will help you fix the issues you have.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, like with anything in life, honesty is the best policy. And the only way to learn is to admit that you don't know something. So, opening up those conversations and it's really vulnerable to talk about finances, but that's the only way that you can get valued insight and lean into people that want to help you and be there for you.
Thanks,
I
Alex.
agree with everything said. I think that, transparency definitely will help because a lot of people, like he was saying, might be, almost scared to talk about their financials. There are some people, depending on circumstance and who they are, they might be scared because they don't want to become a target. But some other people might be scared because they don't want to be seen as less. They don't want to be seen as, I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not making enough as this person, XYZ. But like Alex said, I think the ultimate way to, combat that is just by being honest with yourself and the people around you so that you can get a better understanding of where you are slash where you feel you should be.
Makes sense.
Yeah, agreed on all fronts. And I think the more we talk about it, the more stories we hear in an organization that I'm a part of. We call them our money stories. The more we hear other people's, the more we're going to realize that there are people in our situation and that there's this like huge spectrum of people's financial stories.
Thanks for that, Rose. So our next question is, how do you feel about pay later platforms like Klarna and Affirm? Do you use that option when shopping online? And something that you mentioned, Josh, in the rehearsal was also that credit scores even tie into buy now, pay later kind of situations as well, right? So can you start kind of talking about how you feel about pay later platforms like Klarna and Affirm?
I feel like, buy now, pay later platforms are something that give people a kind of false perception of if I buy it now, if I buy it this way through this method, I'm not spending as much money on it, when in reality you're spending the exact same, and in some cases even more money. Like I remember one of my coworkers at one of my old retail jobs literally showed me what her payments to Afterpay and Klarna looked like, and it would literally eat her entire paycheck. Like you end up spending so much on these third party services that you go to work just to pay for these third party services, and it's crazy to me. But yeah, credit and everything definitely ties into that. Like there are some people who literally cannot use those services because their credit's not high enough. Or not even just their credit not being high enough, but whatever history in their credit, impacts the credit check and everything.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, me personally, horrified to use buy now, pay later services. I don't know if I'm gonna have the funds to pay it off later. So I avoid those all the time. But also I see a lot of people not really knowledge, like I said, about what they do. I've seen people on TikTok and in real life who are like, Klarna, if they get my money, you're messing up your credit. Like you have to pay that off. Um, so yeah, I think honestly, I think they're terrible. Like buy now, pay later, like services. They have their uses for sure, but sometimes I just think like you should not be doing buy now, pay later on Uber Eats. You know what I mean? Paying $25 every 2 weeks for one cheeseburger from Five Guys is not worth it.
Like I know that there will probably never be any sort of limit on these apps, but there needs to be a limit. Like
There,
you
there
past a
has to
certain
be.
amount, with certain transactions, it shouldn't be allowed. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I haven't used them, but have definitely like looked at them and been like, oh, that would be nice. But anytime I'm thinking about using that, it's probably something that I shouldn't be buying. Like it's probably a concert ticket that I like shouldn't be buying. So I I haven't used one yet. And I'm gonna try not to.
Yeah, me as well. I think I actually interviewed at a firm, so I learned a lot about theirs, and that would be the one that I trust the most. But I think the way that there's an inherent mistrust between users and credit card institutions, like they obviously created that tool because they have something to gain from it. And so maybe there are circumstances where if you're in a dire situation and you need something that you need genuinely, maybe I'd consider it, but I am so wary of those across the board.
Thanks, Alex. So we have 3 questions left and about 3 minutes left. So I'm gonna hit these kind of rapid fire, and I'll probably have 2 people answer each. So when you look for credit, financial education, what would be helpful? Videos or classes from an institution like Experian, forums with an educated moderator, what would be most helpful?
I think a mix of all, really. I guess like the issue is again real stories. You know, a lot of these like you heard Alex Rose said they took 2 classes, like 3 between all of them, and they don't know like really understand some of the stuff still works. You know, so it has to be like more toned and refined, but absolutely like a mix of all, really.
Thanks. Rose, you're shaking your head. What do you think?
Yeah, I think like institution was one of the keywords for me, right? When Gen Zers are relying on an institution, they want to feel that personal connection. So like that personal, like personalized videos and things like of that nature and more of that like UGC vibe from an institution, I think would work well.
So would you say the institutional component is that security and that understanding of, okay, I can trust this information, but you don't want it institutionalized. So you really
Exactly.
want it to be practical, specific, real people, real stories, and feel that
Yeah.
nativity.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I would probably be still drawn to someone who is just a normal person being like, hey, I grew up in this kind of like socioeconomically disadvantaged situation. Now I make $200,000 a year and I own a $1 million home. Here's how I did it. Like if that's a TikTok video, I'm watching.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. So next question that I think plays nicely into this, what financial institutions, companies, apps do you not trust and why don't you trust them? Go ahead, Josh.
There's not really, I mean, aside from the third party, like the Klarna buy now, pay later ones, there aren't really too many specifics. I just know what doesn't feel right when it doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? Like if I like, it's my first time using a service like Acorns, except I actually like Acorns, but let's just like use Acorns for example. If I got on Acorns for the first time, I didn't like how it was working, then it's like, okay, I'm just gonna stay away from this. I'm not even gonna remember what it's called. But yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
I don't trust big banks, but I still feel like I have to use them. And I don't trust big banks because we know that they like don't care about people. Like it's like no surprise that like Bank of America and Wells Fargo don't care about you. But I like recently had to have like a really big fight with Bank of America because they, wouldn't help me with some like charge I was disputing. And I just remember being like, oh my God, this is this multi-billion-dollar company and they won't help me with this $100 charge. And I spend thousands of dollars with them a month. So I don't trust them, but I also haven't made the jump to like more like community banks, which I know that those exist. Um, yeah.
No, again, Rose, we're one track right now. We locked in. Like I was gonna mention Bank of America and Wells Fargo specifically. No, we don't rock with them.
Yeah, I've never used either of those. I have an inherent level of mistrust with all of them for the same reason that Rose noted. I think time and time again we see that they don't give a singular hoot about people in our group. So I don't trust them, but I also feel like I need to rely on them. I have banked with community credit unions and I feel a lot more trust there, but it's not something that I'm involved in at this point in my life. I think anytime I feel like I'm being sold to, I'm very wary of that. I don't want to feel like I am being targeted for an upsell, and having a background in sales, it's like really obvious when you're the victim of something and they're trying to make money off of you.
Thanks, Alex. All right, so we are going to close. And I want to get to this, the final questions. If you can just say quickly, kind of yes or no, or social media accounts that you use to get financial knowledge. So what's your relationship? Do you use TikTok? Do you use anything? So quickly share if you use any social media to get financial knowledge. Just say
I'll go first because mine is limited, but I just use the internet. I use the Points Guy. I don't have TikTok, so pretty limited on those fronts.
Thanks,
And then I follow the Elvest Instagram account, and that's pretty much it.
Thanks.
Yeah, for me, TikTok's a big one, and also Reddit. I mentioned Quora, but Quora like actually sucks, so mainly Reddit.
Reddit and TikTok. What about you, Josh?
Reddit, TikTok, Instagram Reels.
Reddit, TikTok, Instagram Reels, and Rose?
Yeah, Instagram and TikTok, just as things come up. One person I've been following, their at is her first 100K, and it's just this wealthy woman who's like, yeah, I became a millionaire. Here's how I did it. And I think she's rad.
Nice. Thanks, Rose. All right, so we're going to close, and I just want to read a note from Brian. He said this is not a question, but he does think we need to give more grace around finances. Everyone doesn't start from the same starting point. Some people feel shame around wanting to get help when they're surrounded by people who look down on them for not being at a specific point at a certain time. And I think we all can relate to that. So thank you very much for that, Brian.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. You guys, I always learn so much from all of you also. It's always incredible, and we really appreciate your honesty and perspectives in all of this. Thank you to our audience. Our next panel for next month will be about Gen Z employees. So Rose, you'll probably have a lot to say about that. And we'll send the class notes and this recording out. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.